Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today I want to talk about the possible future. I've seen a few people getting a little bit negative about the LC and stuff, and I understand, it's not ideal that we have to wait until Q2. However, I'm still remaining positive, or at least choosing to remain positive until proven otherwise. And, well, there's something I wanted to talk about for a while. You see, we are expecting Estalia in the future, in the form of the Dogs of War, but I've always had the idea of mini race packs after the Dogs of War to be able to flesh out Estalia, Talia, all the different places from that book. There's reason to believe this will happen, considering Games Workshop kinda teased the Dogs of War with their own unique iconography in a Old World post a long time ago. And hey, if it's coming to the tabletop, it's likely coming to Total War 2, because, Kislev got redone for that, and Cafe too. And I've been looking at this fan-made concept that was released 9 months ago, and I'll tell you what, the more I look at it, the more it's what I want. So yes, this is fan-made, it's based on some stuff that we already have in lore, but adding to it, and I want to talk about it because this is literally what I want from Estalia. The artist is Danny Delgado, and I'll have the link to it so you can check it out for yourself if you want it in higher quality. But yeah, let's discuss, because there's a lot to talk about here, and I kind of like what I see. This is just a big thing here. And just a quick note before I start, just in case, Estalia is based on Spain, well, more so the Iberian Peninsula, so you're going to see a little bit of, a lot of heavy Spanish influences here, let's just be honest here. We're going to start off with perhaps the coolest concept, which is the Knights of the Raging Bull. Now, this isn't a thing in lore, right? There are no bull riders as far as I remember. This would be very fast-moving heavy cavalry, which would be there to pack a really good punch. I love the concept. The knights look absolutely awesome. I love the idea of having heavy cav like this, and it's not completely out of the question because, well, this is Warhammer and a lot of ridiculous things do happen here. I'd see this as a mirror to, say, for example, the Demigryph Knights for the Empire. So you'd have access to two different variants, one with Lancers, which we've already got like a basic concept here. Obviously, Games Workshop can't take this directly, but you know what I mean. And then a Sword and Shield variant, because obviously that makes quite a lot of sense. Again, it's just about the bulls. I just really like the idea of having some more heavy cavalry. We've got a lot of it with the human factions lately. Bear Riders for Kislev, Demigryphs for the Empire. Hippogriff riders, I guess, kind of fit there for the Bretonnians. So if we do get an Estalia faction, a mini race for Estalia, well, why not bull riders, right? And this could also lead to bull monstrous units, right? So riderless and weaker stats, but you can kind of use them in a similar way to how the ogres use the gorges, for example. Plus, that kind of adds in the whole bull mount option for a lord and hero option, which is kind of cool. I mean, I love the idea of this. Bulls are really common in the Iberian Peninsula. You see that a lot. It's not just because of the bullfighting. I mean, they breed cows a lot. At least they do in the region that I'm in, because I'm in Gibraltar. That's in the area of Andalusia. And yeah, you see a lot of cows. Artillery is pretty basic. You've got the cannon and then you've got the mortar, and that's kind of expected. I would love to see a light cannon too, maybe pulled by horses. This is actually something that we did have in the Dogs of War book, but the idea is just to have something that's quite mobile, and you'll be able to, provide supporting fire at a decent pace, just in case you need to move them around fairly quickly. It might take a while to set up, but once you've got it there, it's firing a little bit faster than normal cannons. Plus, mobility is a big thing. Having artillery that can move around fairly quickly is gonna make it easier for you to be able to do some sieges and stuff. It would have to be faster than, say, for example, the artillery pulled by the Cathayan oxen, because the oxen are just deadly slow, but you can already imagine how quick that would actually go, right? Knights would be expected, light and heavy cavalry, because, well, again, Spain really likes their horses, and yeah, I mean, it's what you're already used to with Bretonnia, especially more Bretonnia than the Empire, because you'd have a few skirmishers, you'd also have some heavy knights, knightly orders are kind of common, so at the beginning, you'd have the basic ones, so you'd have spears, crossbows, probably handguns too, obviously with hand weapons too. I like the idea of this because obviously it kind of makes sense. Then you'd go for the heavy cavalry, again, you'd go for lancers and sword and shield because that makes a lot of sense. I would kind of love to see a style of heavy cav with handguns too, or maybe just rifles, because it just kind of makes sense. Having some heavy cavalry that's sword and board, but also has access to a rifle, do some armor-piercing damage from afar, and then throw them in to do a proper charge. You can already guess that the artist is kind of going with the idea of a bit of a mix of the playstyle of Empire and Bretonnia, and in all honesty, that's pretty much how I've always envisioned Estalia. You can already tell also style-wise, it's very much based on the Conquistadors. This is, funny enough, what most people actually envision Estalia to be like, so you can already see why I liked this fan-made concept so much. Alright, so we got Estalia Militia, and yeah, very basic, very basic weapons, because this would be chaff. There should be like 2 variants if that's the case, this and then another one like the Empire Free Company, so you could have a handgun and be able to skirmish. Yeah, I know a lot of people wouldn't like that because it's like, oh, it's already there, but the fact is, it kind of makes sense. It kind of makes sense. I'm expecting cavalry and gunpowder. This is like anti-Bretonnia, but I'm expecting a lot of that from Estalia because that's kind of how everything kind of worked with Spain. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Remember, Warhammer takes from the historical stuff and turns it into a fantasy world. So definitely the parallels need to be there, and it just kind of makes a lot of sense. Hombres Villanos would be like your state troopers, right? So sword and board, you get them with spears, halberds, handguns, crossbows, a little bit of everything, and I think that kind of makes sense. It just fills out the roster already. Even with what we've already talked about, there's a decent sized roster, and you'd kind of want this anyway because you need a basic front line. And yeah, it's taking from the Empire. So it would basically take the rigging and the animations from the Empire. This is why I like the idea of some human factions that need to be added in, because it would take from rigs and animations already established, already in-game, and then just repurposed. And before someone calls it lazy, look, it's an established human nation. Humans are going to fight in a very similar way, especially if they're very close to each other, and they're going to use a lot of the same weaponry, so it makes sense to use the same rigs and animations. Plus, this adds in like, 5, possibly 6 types of new units, which then allows you to have a decent amount of variety, which is a good thing. Diestros are another unit, and before anything, yes, these are actually mentioned in lore. You'd be surprised how much of this stuff is actually mentioned in lore. So this would be like a higher tier type of unit, maybe even a hero, I think, because it is a skilled swordsman. It could probably work. I don't know. I kind of like the idea of this as a unit with additional hand weapons. Obviously, you can tell here you've got the blade, the rapier, and you've also got like a hand weapon on the side. It could work for both. It could literally be a hero and also a unit type for the different types of weaponry. It's something definitely very different, and it would just kind of make Estalia quite unique. I love the style. I honestly really love the style. The art style is pretty cool too. But just imagine either in hero form or even a unit form, this would be anti-infantry. They'd be quite fast at moving, pretty good at skirmishing, maybe even with Vanguard too. And maybe even a second variant which has access to handguns, which would work very similar to like the militia, so the Free Company, but just very, very strong. This would be like the ultimate tier type of version of it. A Tercio would be your high tier ground unit, and these would come with either halberds or the handguns or crossbows. I like the idea of it. Makes them quite viable for different things. There'd be anti-large. There'd probably be a sword and shield version too, because, well, it just kind of makes sense. And it solves a problem for Estalia that the Empire also suffers from, which is the whole thing of no high tier infantry. Well, you've got the great swords, but that's it. Speaking of which, they really need mounted knights on foot for the Empire, but this is all about Estalia. It'd be pretty interesting if you could see them with the handguns and also with the halberds. They'd be a hybrid unit. Hybrid units are kind of common now with Kislev. And I wouldn't say it's a bad thing to have Estalia being quite hybrid focused, because it's this era of Spain, the whole Conquistador era. Like I said, loads of gunpowder, loads of knights, so having some hybrids kind of round up the roster a little bit more. Alanos de Guerra are war dogs, and they look freaking cool. I love the concept idea of having some armored war dogs. The thing is, let's be honest, Creative Assembly like using the Warhound animations and rigs as much as possible, and really, Warhounds were a thing in lore. Hell, you could even field them in 6th edition if you played as Mindenheim with the Storm of Chaos list. Bretonnia is known to use a lot of hounds too with the Truffle Hounds, and it makes sense for Estalia to have hunting dogs too. It just kind of makes sense. So why not have some dogs but with decent armor so they won't be as useless as the Warhounds? Well, Warhounds are objectively a little bit better lately, they are, but, some armor would keep them alive a little bit longer. You could use them for a bit of a shock, a bit of a heavy shock would be nice. And I just love the idea of it. I honestly love the idea of it. Knights of the Blazing Sun are a unit that we already have in-game, but are centered around Myrmidia, which is the highest deity in Estalia. So I don't mind the idea of a unit that's already in-game being also usable by another faction. Hell, we already kind of have this anyway with, you know, Chaos Warriors of Khorne being in not only the Khornate faction, but also with the Khorne Warriors faction. Or hell, the Warhounds being practically everywhere, or Giants being used by every Tom, Dick, and Harry. Maybe step it up a notch and have like a foot variant, because foot knights would be kind of useful, especially really heavy armor. They'd be like your highest form of infantry. Plus, still, you know, Knights of the Blazing Sun are cool, and cool factor is a big thing. I know a lot of people don't get too excited about knightly orders and stuff, but there's a lot missing, and I'm hoping we will see more of them being represented. Maybe they could just make up a new one, because it kind of makes sense too. But if the assets are there, you might as well use them, as it's a unit that just really makes sense for Estalia. Alright, so Shield Maidens. This is a really interesting thing. The Order of the Righteous Spear. The funny thing is that not too long ago, Cubicle 7 actually released something in a very similar style, and it's basically a warrior priest. A warrior priest of Myrmidia, and I love the idea of it, so it's something that we're going to be seeing in the future anyway. Now, for those asking about the whole Cubicle 7 thing, they are basically working on Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, but all the stuff that we've seen there has to be approved by Games Workshop and does get made officially canon. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has also been updating Warhammer Fantasy lore very well, especially recently. We've got some updates to Koresh, Ind, and loads of other places. So the idea is here that something like this is very possible. And a warrior priest type is always good because, you know, buffers and stuff. We've already got that in the Empire. We've got that with Kislev, with the Patriarchs. I wouldn't mind that if we had that here. Spear and shield variants, quite fast, good for anti-large. Weapon variants would be cool. It's just, we don't really get that. Please, Creative Assembly. Yeah, weapon variants would be lovely for Lords and Heroes. But yeah, it's a buffer and it's anti-large. I mean, what's not to love, right? And it would likely be a hero and possibly a Lord version too. And lastly, this is the Herensuge, which is a boss creature, actually. It's not from Warhammer Fantasy lore as far as I'm aware. I'm not sure this has gotten any mentions. This could just be a concept done by the artists themselves. But it's pretty cool. It's basically like a flying Hydra, and I mean, who doesn't want that? When I look at it in terms of real-life mythology and so on, it's a type of dragon, which, well, you know, Creative Assembly love dragons. The fact is that every faction needs some sort of big monster, and this would be kind of cool. Fast-moving, it would be doing a decent amount of damage, it could fly too. Flying stuff would be kind of useful. Like, I always thought flying bulls would be a thing, but then again, that's also something that we'd expect in the Chaos Dwarf roster. So having something original could be something like this. I'm not too sure. I'll be very honest, when it comes to mythology, I'm not too well versed when it comes to all of the stuff in the Iberian Peninsula, but I'm imagining, since it's quite, you know, it is in Europe, so a lot of the stuff would be the same. This creature is definitely something very impressive, and you never know, The idea is, Estalia needs to become a thing. If we get the Dogs of War, the mini race pack thing is going to flesh it out. This isn't a full Estalian roster, and obviously we'd have to take into account some laws of magic and lord choices and stuff, but Dogs of War will have some stuff already in there. Then if it just gets fleshed out, we could think about this with Talia, Estalia, Araby. All those are in the Dogs of War, and then getting fleshed out in their own right by a mini race pack with one legendary lord each, or maybe even two if they want to just add in another one. It could bring in a fresh amount of potential, flesh out the world a little bit more, and no more Empire clones. I'm tired of seeing them there. As much as like mods fix that, it's something that just really grates me knowing that what's already there, you know? I still have hope that this is a eventuality, not just a theory, but we're gonna have to wait and see. Now, with all that being said, what do you guys think about a concept like this? I think that the artist has really good ideas. Going back into lore, it makes a lot of sense because a lot of the stuff was mentioned in lore. And yeah, I like it. Honestly, I'm a big fan. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a discussion. And if you can think of any units that could kind of fit in here, yeah, leave a comment. I'd love to know. I'd honestly really love to know. Until then, I hope you're all having a lovely day, and I shall see you all again very soon.